A lot of people want to know what would it be like for me to live or even travel to a country like Sweden and not be able to know any Swedish. I spent a semester during high school, which was, I don't even want to count back how many years ago that was. But I would spend half the day in a Swedish class to learn Swedish, and the other half was at my school attending the regular high school class. In fact, I remember during the time they put me in the high school English class because they wanted me to be able to read some things and have people to be able to hear my accent. And at the time, they were teaching very proper British English, and the teacher finally kicked me out because she's like, I don't want them to hear your accent anymore because I'm teaching them the British accent. And this is so interesting for me because today this has changed so much in Sweden. I've asked several of my family and other people, what percentage of Swedes do you think speak fluent English? And most of them said 80% or 83%. But the truth is that today, about 90% of all Swedes speak fluent English. What that means that if you travel to Sweden and you stop 10 people on the street, of those 10, 8 of them, or almost 9 of them, will probably speak very fluent English. And maybe you might find 1 or 2 whose English is not so good, but can probably still help you and answer your question. Of the younger generation, this is particularly true. They have mastered English. And for so many of them that have never lived in like America or England or Australia or, an English-speaking country, their English is flawless. I mean, for some of them, you can't even hear a Swedish accent. It is so perfect. And one of the reasons is when I was in Sweden is that they would have these American or British television shows that are shown on Swedish TV in English. And I'd just be like, wow, this is so great. I can watch all these shows and understand them completely. So today, of course, there's a lot of English that they're being surrounded by. In fact, I know for some of my Swedish friends, they may watch almost all their television in English, and they're downloading movies in English, and they're listening to music in English. So they're being surrounded by English all the time. But not everyone in Sweden can speak good English, and not everyone speaks fluent English, and particularly some of the older people there. So if you find anyone that's over 60 years old, they might struggle with their English. My mother has a cousin in Sweden, Christina, and she struggles a bit with her English, even though she can write some, communicate some, but she's not as fluent as many of the other younger generation is. The truth is that English is so widely spoken in Sweden that you could very comfortably live in Sweden and get around, do your shopping, meet your friends, have a very active social life without speaking fluent Swedish. And the other truth of it is that your friends there in Sweden, their English will probably be so much better than your Swedish that when you get talking to them in Swedish, they may feel that you're a little bit uncomfortable or you're not saying things completely right. So they may automatically switch over to English anyway. So you will really have a hard time to be able to learn Swedish unless you really, really practice Swedish and really make it a part of being able to learn it. Because the truth is that many of the Swedes will just switch over to speak English to you anyways. But despite all of that if you go to live in Sweden and you have what's called a very important thing, you have a tax number or you have all your legal paperwork, then you have the right to be able to take a free English class. Now, this can be for immigrants or this could be for anybody who goes to Sweden to live and to work. And these classes will be all over in all different parts of Sweden. And they have these courses all set up and they have qualified teachers who know how to teach Swedish as a second language. Sweden and the Swedish government believe so much in the foreigners learning to speak Swedish and not just, living there speaking English, that they believe that all the immigrants and those that come there should learn and understand Swedish to be fully integrated in the Swedish society. One thing they always point out, and they say, look, if you ever have to deal with the tax authorities or do your tax work, or you have to maybe deal with the police, you may have to do it in Swedish and not English, so you need to learn it. And the other part of this is that they are so dedicated to this, to people who migrate and live and work in Sweden, that they offer the Swedish language instruction in English, Spanish, Turkish, Somali, Persian, and Arabic. So not only if an immigrant or somebody comes from one of these speaking countries, they could go to Sweden and they could take a course to learn Swedish in their native language. They don't have to first speak English in order to take the Swedish course. I think that this is really great that they have invested so much in this and have teachers that are able to teach in all of these different languages. So anyone that is over the age of 16 years old that has the right to live and work in Sweden, which means that you're legally registered with the tax authorities, has the right to study Swedish free through one of Sweden's many language programs. Now, if you don't live in Sweden, they have some online courses you can pay to take to learn some Swedish. I find this fascinating that even though a majority of the Swedish population speak fluent English, and you could still live and you could work comfortably within Sweden, and you could have a social life, you could talk to people, you could do shopping, you could probably go to the grocery store, ask people questions, find out where something is down the aisle without speaking a word of Swedish. But yet if you fully want to integrate into the Swedish society and you fully want to have a rich experience within Sweden, especially if you're going to immigrate there, and if Sweden is going to be the place you are going to live for the rest of your life, it is essential that you learn Swedish and that you learn to speak the Swedish language to fully integrate within Sweden and to fully integrate within the Swedish society. Not only will your Swedish friends be extremely pleased that you can speak Swedish and you're trying to learn Swedish, and in my experience, when they see that you're trying, they will even help you with it. But you will have to make an effort because, like I said before, almost all of the Swedish people you will meet will speak much better English than you will at the present time speak Swedish, especially if you are just learning Swedish. So it's very important that you make the effort, if you are living and working there, to speak the Swedish language. Because you will find that you'll have a richer experience if you do than without speaking any Swedish at all. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed our Dusty Roads podcast, where we talk about all things about living life as a global citizen and all things about life and the world outside of us. Our goal is to help people to be able to see that there's this other world out there and to be able to experience a little bit, even if they can't travel there, to experience it through our eyes and through things which we have observed. Also, check out our blog, A Bus on a Dusty Road. You can discover lots of great content there, not just about Sweden, but about Asia and other parts of the world. Thank you so much for listening. We know it's because of those of you that listen that make this possible. Subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends about it too. We'd love to hear from you and love to have you be part of our community. Thank you so much for listening.